we're going to go ahead and take a look at sine and cosine graphs again. Now, we're going to use our calculator. We're going to go to our y equals. We're going to type in the sine of x. And then we also want to type in this one here, which is 3 times the sine of x. And we want to know how they compare. Now, make sure you're in the degree mode. So hit your mode button. Make sure you're in the degree mode. Then before we hit graph, I want to hit zoom, which is the top center button. And then I want to go down to zoom trig, which is number 7. So here's my basic sine graph. It's coming in just as we would expect it. Ah, so now we have the red. The red is the one with the 3 in front of it. How is the red different than the blue being our original? Well, you can see we go up, go down, up. Our period is not changed. However, our amplitude has changed. Amplitude is how far up and down you go before it goes above and below your axes. So blue, the original, only went up 1 and went down 1. The red went up 3 and down 3. In other words, we had a vertical stretch of 3, which means our amplitude is 3. Let's take a look at the next one here and graph that one. So go back to your y equals, and we're going to put 0.5. And I'm going to just insert, so I don't have to retype everything, my 5. And then we're going to look at that. Here's my original blue coming on in. And now the red one's going to come in, and we want to know how that changes. Once again, the period stays the same, but it's only going half as far up and down. So the number in front seems to do a vertical stretch, and that means we would then have a vertical stretch of 1/2, making it half as tall, and our amplitude would be 1/2. So we talked about what happens when you put numbers in front of your trig function. What happens when you put numbers in front of your angle? So let's quickly graph those. So we still have our basic sine function, and then we need to put a number in front of our angle. And then we'll graph that. We want to know how the red will compare to our original blue. Now, in comes the red. Wow. It's not going up and down any farther. So our amplitude's not changing. But you'll notice it's going up and down a lot faster than it does normally. So as you look here, we go up, down, up. That's one full period. Up, down, up. One full period. Up, down, up. So that's 3 full periods of the red in 1 full period of the blue. So that means we have 3 times as many periods, or our period is 1/3 as much. It actually does a horizontal stretch of 1/3. So that means our period is less. Our period, instead of being 2 pi, is 2 pi over 3, because 2 pi times 1/3, because it's a horizontal stretch of 1/3, 2 pi times 1/3 is 2 pi over 3. Now, let's see what happens when we try this one over here and put a 1/2 in front instead of the 3, putting it in front of our angle, not in front of our trig function. Wow, look at that. Now, It normally goes up, down, up for a full period. But here we go one full period for the blue, a second full period for the blue, and that's what it is for one full period of the red. So in other words, the red is twice as wide as the blue. So it does a horizontal stretch of 2. And that makes our period then twice as long. So our period then will be 4 pi. So in general, the number in front does a vertical stretch, and the number in front is your amplitude. But amplitude's always positive. The number in front of your variable or your angle does a horizontal stretch, and it's 360 over your period for your b value, or 360 over your b value tells you your period. So if we went 360 or 2 pi over our 3 here, that tells us what we had here. So let's take a look at this graph. We want to find our amplitude, we want to find our period, our frequency, and our midline. Now, keep in mind that for your amplitude, it's how far up and down you go from the line that cuts it in half. Well, if I cut it here, I go down 4 here, but then I go up 8 here. So it's definitely not in the middle. So I'm going to try moving it up a couple. So now, how far down do I go? I go from 2 above to 4 below, which is 6 away, and from 2 above to 8 above. So that's my amplitude then, is 6, because I'm going 6 on each side. Now that's one way to do it. A second way you could do it is to take the maximum, which is how far up it goes, which is 8, minus the minimum, which is -4. Subtract them, divide by 2, and you get 6. By the way, this line that's cutting it in half is actually the equation of your midline. That's y equals 2. Well, how do you find that midline? You can go the maximum plus the minimum, because it's the average. So max plus the min divided by 2, and we get that 2. Your period is how far you have to go before you repeat. So I'm going to start here, go up, down, up, then it goes up, but this isn't the same. So I have to go all the way over to here where the crosshairs is before it starts to repeat. Just a little bit more than 6. So I'm going to say my period is about, and it's not getting off there, a little bit more than 6, so I'm going to say 6.2. Frequency, frequency is just the reciprocal of the period. So I need to go 1 over 6.2. Well, if I go 1 over 6.2 and work that out, I get about 0.16. So let's go ahead and quickly try to do these. Remember, amplitude's the number in front, which there is no number, so it's assumed to be 1. So our amplitude is 1. Our period is affected by the number that's in front of your angle. And we need to go our normal period divided by the number in front of your angle. So our normal period divided by 1/3. Well, instead of dividing by 1/3, that means we multiply by the reciprocal of 3. So our normal period of 2 pi divided by 1/3 ends up being 6 pi. To graph this, you want to start out with just your xy axes. And now we're going to just draw in your normal basic sine function without any tick marks. Don't put any tick marks on your graph at this point. Remember, sine starts at the origin, then goes up, comes back down, comes back up, and then really continues on past that. Now, we're going to mark our amplitude and our period on our graph after we've drawn it. It goes up to a height of 1, so I'm going to mark my height as being 1. Goes down to a depth of -1 because that's my amplitude is 1, so I need to go 1 on each side. One full period goes to here, so I need to mark this value right here as my period of 6 pi. So this is 6 pi. By the way, this would then be halfway in between, so that's going to be 3 pi. So I drew in my graph and I put my tick marks and scale on afterwards. By doing that, I now have my graph drawn correctly. So put your tick marks on after you draw it. Try to do this one here quickly and then watch the video. The number in front is your amplitude, so that's 1/3. The number in front of my angle is 1, so it's not changing my period, so my period is going to be 2 pi. So start out with your basic sine function. Just draw that in on your axes without any tick marks. Now, the top of this is going to be my amplitude of 1/3. Bottoms out here, right here at this height, comes over here. That's going to be negative 1/3. One full period then goes to here, so I need to mark that as one full period, so that's going to be 2 pi. This is halfway in between, so that's going to be pi. By the way, if it does extend, this then would then be 3 pi. We also want to do that for our cosine graphs. So let's take a look at this, because the numbers with your cosine also follow the same pattern that they do with your sine. The number in front, which is our 2, tells us our amplitude. This number here, we go our normal period divided by this number, and that tells us our period. So we'll go our normal period of 2 pi divided by 1/4, but instead of dividing by 1/4, you multiply by the reciprocal of 4. 2 pi times 4 is 8. Draw your xy axes, draw in your basic cosine graph without any tick marks. Remember, cosine starts out at the top and then comes back down. It starts here, comes back down, comes back up. Now we're going to put in our tick marks. It tops out at our amplitude, which is 2, bottoms out at the opposite of our amplitude, which is negative 2. So you should mark this as 2, mark this as negative 2. Now, one full period goes from the top to the bottom back to the top. So directly below the second top here is one full period, which is 8 pi. The valley on our cosine graph is halfway in between, so directly above the valley needs to be half of our period, which is 4 pi. By the way, it crosses your x-axis halfway in between here and your 4 pi, so that's 2 pi. Whoa, sorry. And it's not getting out of there. There we go. And then this one here is 6 pi. Try to quickly do the last one and then watch the video. Amplitude is 3. Period is going to be pi. Draw your cosine graph without any tick marks. Mark the top as your amplitude of 3. Mark the bottom as the opposite of your amplitude of negative 3. Underneath the second peak is one full period, which is pi. Halfway between is your valley, and that's pi over 2.